Hi guys, and welcome to our next module and video, and this video is all about system hackings. So what you need to know about system hacking, how to implement that, how to actually do that, and how to even use that vulnerability in order to hack the system you want, the system you target. This module now is all about the hacking itself. So for the previous modules we were also gathering information and we were scanning vulnerabilities, but we did not get to exact hacking. But in this one, we're gonna go for exact hacking without any more information gathering, without any more analyzing vulnerabilities. Now in this module, we're gonna go directly for the hacking itself. So we're gonna use exploit, we're gonna use payloads, we're gonna even write our own things in Python and C. So we're gonna see how the things you build from nothing are starting to work and starting to actually do the work for us, and so on and so on. So in this module, we're going to use our programming skills. We're going to show you how to program in Python and C, a basic, fundamental programming. We're going to use the exploits, we're going to use the payloads, we're going to use Metasploit modules, we're going to use many stuff that are really interesting in. So pay close attention to that, because this module is really important, since now we're actually taking the right actions from the information gathered before. Now we are using the select payloads, using the proper exploits, and just making the attack, making the exploits happen, and making all the things, the hacking come true. So this will be all the module is going to be about. All the videos from besides that one is going to be practical, and in all the videos I'm going to include a little bit of theory, because for example in the programming videos you're going to need some of the libraries, how do they work, what are they represent, and so on. So let's start. Now we have system hacking. What is system hacking, and what's actually that exact thing when we are talking about system hacking? So system hacking is basically the exploiting of the vulnerability. We are actually taking the exploit, taking the vulnerability, developing an exploit, and shooting that exploit. That's the system hacking. As we've talked before, we can either actually search for a specific exploit or develop ourselves own. So we can either make an exploit, or we can either search for it in Google or search engines, or wherever we can. So this is the procedure: search for information, gather information, search for vulnerabilities, analyze that vulnerabilities, see if they can do the work for us, and therefore search for exploit and develop an exploit. So this is what is system hacking. It's all about exploiting the target, like taking the advantage of that weak spot that the target has, and actually gaining high privileges, breaking into a system, and obtaining control. So the exploiting, the hacking, is actually obtaining control. Online and in the media you can see the words in the term hacking in many different terms included, because hacking is way too abstract said. Let's say that hacking is just the abstract term. In our terminology, hacking means gaining access, hacking means breaking into the system, or hacking means taking a complete control over the machine or the network or the system, and whenever you like to say that. So in our terminology, hacking says just that, to take control, to break into a system. Because hacking for other people who are not that qualified in cybersecurity, hacking can be, for example, shutting down the server. Yeah, it's kind of hacking again, but that's not what we seek. As we said, the shutting down the server does not give us control, does not give us like any high privileges. Shutting down the server is just shutting down the server, like remotely enabling all users to use that service, and that's all about. So I don't think it's a good practice to actually call that a hacking. For me, hacking is the process of obtaining high privileges, breaking into a system, and actually gaining control over the network, over the machines, and as many things as possible. So how the system hacking is done? There are two types of system hacking, and they are separated. Like for example, the vulnerability analysis was separated with the code side and server side. The system hacking is separated by running exploits on network level, or in other words, network penetration test, and exploiting the web application, in other words, web application penetration test. So we have like two options. One of them is just running exploits on network level, and we call that network penetration test or network hacking. And the second option is like running from the web app, like shooting parameters, shooting different different strings, different things on different forms, searching for like directories, searching for specific login page, searching for default passwords, searching for default users, searching for everything, exploiting that knowledge, and so on and so on. So this is what we call web penetration test, web app penetration test. So let's first start breaking the network penetration test. And from the previous knowledge that you should know that while talking about network and exploiting, we are talking about the actual package sent when we are actually sending packets to that specific machine. The packets can be malicious, they can hold inside malicious instructions, so when they receive to the destination point, they can execute that instructions and force the machine to actually act unwantedly, to behave unwantedly. So network penetration test, it's all about sending packets. We cannot use parameters there, we cannot send JavaScript there, we cannot actually browse directories there. We can send packets to a server on the port that it actually accepts that packets. So from here you have to know that how the firewall works, and I really hope you've watched the previous videos about networking. There I explain how the firewall are working actually. And so if you actually send a packet to a service or port that sitting behind a firewall and the firewall is filtering the connection, you cannot get anything from there because firewall is gonna stop you. So there I was explaining that the firewall is your best enemy, and now you're gonna see why. We need to actually seek for vulnerabilities on the ports that are actually opened and actually start by exploiting that open ports. We cannot go for the closed one or the filtered one, it's really hard because the firewalls are actually filtering that traffic and it's forbidding us to connect to that service. So in order to connect to that service, we somehow need to actually bypass and go into the inside of the network in order to actually interact with that specific port on that specific service. So the next penetration test is about web application, and as we've mentioned before, it is like passing arguments, passing parameters, passing everything, trying default users, trying like different scripts, different injections. We can like do comment injection from there, we can do like HTML injection. There are many stuff to cover about, but the main idea here is that you are not actually sending crafted packets to a malicious packets to a specific server. You are actually sending so let's say web packets, web information like parameters, to actually want and force the server, the application to behave unwantedly. So that can mean if we, for example, send a special crafted script, that script upon execution on server can give us a remote shell. Let's say that we can actually, for example, upload a file and the web application says that it wants only a JPEG file, so we actually manipulate that system in order to allow our file, which can be PHP or which can be shell file, to actually upload, and therefore we need to find that file and furthermore execute it. So from the web application test we have more options to go. We have really a lot of options to play around and a lot of options to go for hacking actually. And for example, the web application pen test and the network pen test can be actually linked. You can try both, you should try both and see where you can get success. As we've talked about before, the hacking is not about just knowing everything. The hacking is about trying everything and figuring out everything. So you don't have to know everything, you need to know how to think, and you need to know where and what to search for. This is what hacking is all about. So in the web penetration test, we are all about passing different parameters, searching for different like login panels, like pages, like files that are not supposed to be open, searching for the things where they go when we upload them, and therefore we can start actually playing around with the web app, like forcing it to behave unwantedly. This can mean uploading file that is not supposed to be uploaded. This can mean that accepting and actually calculating the JavaScript that we send that is not supposed to calculate that and to process that, and so on and so on and so on. So there are many types of attacks there. There are many types of attack vectors that we're gonna see all of them in future videos. But for now, I just want to give you a brief idea about what you can do and what to actually go for. So the tools I use for system hackings are Python, Ruby, C, and C++. So you can see that those three are actually programming languages, and we're gonna explain that in future. So the next thing I use is Metasploit, Armitage, and many more. So let's start breaking the things up into all the tools that are gathered here. So why Python, Ruby, C, and C++? So those types of programming languages are the best one for hacking. And what do I mean for that? Those languages are actually invented to be like a multi-platform, to be spread easily, and to be run easily. So for example, if you run Java application and you compile the Java application, if you do not have the Java virtual machine, you will not be able to run that application, or you will not be able to decompress the jar file. So this makes the deploying really hard if you do not have the Java virtual machine, and that means that, for example, to write exploit on Java and to run that exploit on Java, you must have Java virtual machine. And if you have newer or older version, there is no guarantee that the exploit is going to run. So what does it make difference about those two languages? So let's start with the C and C++ one. C is like a language used for creating of Unix. This language is almost everywhere. It's in embedded systems, it's in exploits, it's in viruses, it's in systems for traffic lights, it's just everywhere. This language is just everywhere. It's developing hacks, it's developing malicious software, it's developing good software, it's just everywhere. And the cool thing about C is that it's working on a lower level of the machine, so it's working directly with the memory, and it can directly touch the memory itself. And therefore we see there are multiple attacks, multiple exploits that are made only on C. For example, buffer overflows, and for example, integer underflows, the dirty cow is made on C, and many more. So the C and C++ are really powerful languages, and they are used like for system hacking on a low level. So for example, getting high privileges, like for example crashing the whole system, for example getting all the privileges out there, and many more stuff. The C is just amazing language for that. It can be used for ransomware, for decrypting files, and encrypting files, of course. It can be used for many attacks, many attack vectors, and the C is just great. And you're gonna see examples of that in the future videos. So then why Python and Ruby? Python and Ruby are actually script based, so Python is a little bit of a complex language. It is like a OP language, it's like a scripting language, but it has classes inside. It can act like an OP language, but as well it can actually act as a scripting languages and open languages, so like Java. So the Python is really complex and strange language, but it's really amazing, and it can do a lot of things. So the most exploits that are actually remote are used on Python, are created on Python, because Python has amazing set of libraries and amazingly simplicity language. So it can use the networking, and it can even create nmap scans. It can go for sending crafted packets, and you can do it all manually. So there's a book about it, for example the Black Hat Python one, which I highly recommend to read and actually learn how to use Python for hacking, because Python is a language that can be used for almost anything. Python can be used for machine learning, Python can be used for system hacking as well, but the C is kind of better than that. And Python can be used for remote exploits, Python can be used for creating server clients and many more stuff. And the cool thing about Python is that it is really easy to actually implement that language. So if you write a program in C, for example, like 50 rows, the Python it will be only 10 or 15. So it's just amazing simplicity since you get used to it. The syntax is really easy, and you don't need to deal with the memory inside, and you don't need to deal with all that stuff whatsoever. So I really like Python. It can do really amazing things, and we're gonna see all that in future. We're gonna see a lot of examples with Python. And then we have Ruby, which are actually most of the Metasploit modules are made on Ruby. I personally do not know Ruby that much. I know that it can be acting like a script language. It's actually a scripting language, and most of the payloads of exploits actually in Metasploit, most of the modules are made on Ruby. There are exploits made on Ruby. You can use Ruby for developing exploits too. There are frameworks that are actually creating exploits on Ruby, and you can compile that to an exe, so it's kind of good again. And as we said before, you don't need to know everything, you need to try everything. So for example, when we are trying to bypass the antivirus, we're going to use all of that techniques and kind of tools to actually to exploit and actually evade that antivirus and firewall systems. So all these things can be used for creating malicious software. They can be used for system and remote hacking, but of course in C and C++, the network hacking, so the remote hacking is kind of hard and complicated. So if you're going for remote hacking, better pick Python or Ruby. If you're going for system hacking, better pick C or C++. And of course they are different, but since you know how to code, you need only to run the documentation and you are ready to go. So let's take over what is a Metasploit, because we've mentioned it a lot of times and we did not actually explain what is Metasploit. So the Metasploit is a framework for hacking. It's all that is. It's a framework. It has its own syntax. It has its own parameters, different options. It's like a new terminal with new syntax, depends only on hacking. That's like Metasploit. It's a framework and database of exploits and payloads based on vulnerabilities. So the Metasploit works with exploits and payloads and modules, and the modules are just making the hacking process easy. So Metasploit has database of known vulnerabilities, and based on that, they have developed a database of exploits and payloads. So for example, that vulnerability has that Metasploit module, which uses that exploit, which afterwards executes that payload. And you're gonna see all that in a future video, so do not worry for now. You just need to know the basic theory about Metasploit. It's just a framework for hacking, and this is all what it is. So it can be used only for, it can be used not only for actually hacking, it can be used for gathering information and scanning and many more stuff. But the main idea of Metasploit is about hacking. Most of the tools there are built on Ruby and Python, and it's actually making the hacking automatic. It's something like a Nessus itself. Nessus is like scanning the vulnerabilities, comparing, and gives us the result in the previous video you saw. And the Metasploit is like doing the same thing but with hacking. We just specify the vulnerability, specify the exploit, specify the payload, type the keyword exploit or run, and the Metasploit is sending that packets or sending them parameters needed and making that automatically. And if it succeeded, it gives us the reverse shell of the payload we've specified there. It's something like the Nessus but for hacking, not for vulnerability scanning. So what is Armitage? Armitage is like Metasploit in graphical user interface. It's not anymore. It just makes the whole Metasploit things even easier. You can click just with the mouse and specify the parameters with the mouse, and that's all you have to do. It's just the graphical Metasploit. It can map the hosts, it can scan and map the hosts, and it can actually run the things Metasploit can run, but there is a graphical user interface. Of course there is a console before it, but it's easier to use, easier to understand. So if you are kind of new, we're going to explore the both options, the Armitage and Metasploit, but I personally prefer, and I highly recommend you to get used to the Metasploit one, because the fastest you get to use to the console applications, the console interface, the CLI, the better for you. Because trust me, everything about Linux is connected to console interface, and the faster you get used to it, the better. So I highly recommend sticking with Metasploit. We're gonna see how the Armitage looks like, what does it do, but we're gonna use Metasploit more. And I really like that the console applications more, because whenever you get to a reverse shell, there is no graphical user interface. You do not need to start a graphical user interface program, because they're gonna be displayed on a target's machine, and so on. He's gonna know that he's being hacked. But while you are actually standing behind the console and doing your stuff, he would not even recognize something strange happened until you actually mistake yourself. So this is the benefits of staying with the console applications. So let's move on. And how the Metasploit is actually working, we've mentioned it before, but let's say that Metasploit is automatically sending an exploit over the target. So you have to actually find the vulnerability, specify the vulnerability, actually see if it's what you actually want. Therefore, you can search for modules and exploits in Metasploit, and if it matches, if you have that specific vulnerability and you have that exploit, you can try specify the options with the show options command and specify all the options needed, and therefore run the exploit directly to the target. After you run that exploit, you're gonna see the output, and if it's successful, if it's really vulnerable, it's gonna be exploited. There are exploits that do not have Metasploit module, but you can try exploit them manually, and that's why the first thing is to learn to exploit things manually before going to Metasploit. Because we cannot depend on the 1.2, as we said before many times, and I'm gonna continually say that many times, that we cannot depend on 1.2. Yeah, Metasploit is great, it can give us a lot of options, a lot of opportunities, but we cannot depend on Metasploit for everything. Let's say that we get used to Metasploit so much that we cannot even exploit the vulnerability manual, and when we get actually into a vulnerability that has not Metasploit module, we are not going to exploit it just because we don't know how. So we first, the same thing with the Nessus, first need to know how to actually exploit things manually, and therefore start using Metasploit. So because Metasploit is just automatic tool, we just specify the options, the host, the ports, we say the keyword exploit, we specify the payload, and it's doing its own work, it's sending its own packets, and it just gives us an output if it was successful or not. If it was successful, great, we are into the system. If not, then try another exploit, and this is the cycle. So let's actually explain what is a session, because I have mentioned it before. A session is basically when two devices communicate with each other. So for example, when you go to a website, when you navigate to a website, you open a session with that server, and so the two devices start to communicate. So I want to get that from you, I want to post that in you, and then the cycle continues. So this is like the session. The two devices communicate to each other. The session can be anything, it can be HTTP, it can be anything, but in our information security, a session we call when we actually have a reverse or a bind shell connections. So the session means connections, and the connection can be two types, it can be bind or it can be reverse. And so now it's time to explain what is bind and what is reverse. So the reverse connection, or a reverse shell in other words, is actually when we are forcing the target machine to connect to us. And this is most likely to evade most of the firewalls. IDS, IPS is amazing technique for evading firewalls. So let's say that most firewalls are made this way. They are blocked for blocking content, blocking packets when they are coming from inside. So for example, if the MySQL server is standing before firewall, all the connections coming inside will be blocked. But let's say that with reverse shell, we are actually connecting from the target to us, so we go from inside out from the server, and therefore we connect to our machine. The most firewalls do not expect such behavior and are not configured to handle such behavior, and therefore that's why we bypass most of the firewalls using reverse shells. This is the most amazing techniques that we can get for getting a reverse access, remote access. By remote access, I mean accessing the remote target's terminal. We are not talking about accessing remote targets like desktop, because we would get stuck and easily triggered. We are talking about accessing remote server's shell. So we are operating under the operating system, and we are doing whatever we want stealthy, since we don't make any mistake. So reverse shell is dangerous. Reverse shell is easy way to bypass security systems like IDS, IPS, because they are not configured to actually trace such behavior. For them, when the target machine is connecting to us, they don't see anything strange. For example, we set up the reverse shell on a specific port, like for example we set the reverse shell on a port 80. So when we are connecting the targeting machine to us on port 80, the firewalls is going to think that that machine is just connecting to the internet and is browsing something, nothing else. So that's why it's the most amazing technique that we can use. As we've mentioned before, setting up the HTTP server can be on any port, so that it can be for any service out there. We can set up the SSH service on port 99, we can set up the FTP on port 9999, we can set up everything whenever we want. And for example, we can set up the reverse shells, the exploits, the payloads, to be listening on a specific and connecting on a specific port that in first eye is actually harmless. For example, we're gonna set up our machine as a server, and our target machine is gonna act like a client. And this is how the reverse connection is actually made. So we are stating our machine as a server and it starts listening on a specific port, for example 80, and by remote command execution or other techniques, we are forcing the target machine to actually connect to us from inside out, so they work like a client. And when we make that communication, we get access to its shell. And this is called reverse shell. It's the amazing way to bypass all security systems. And reverse shell is better than bind shell, which bind shell is basically when we as an attacker are connecting to the targeted machine. So the targeted machine is still acting like a server. They are just still waiting a connection, but we find an exploit and vulnerability that can actually allow us to connect to that specific port on that specific machine. So this is the most dangerous one because we have more chance of getting triggered. We have more chance of getting revealed of what we actually can do for that. We're gonna be revealed by using bind shells, most of the times by firewalls, by IDS, by IPS. We're gonna get revealed, so the reverse shell is always the better, since we are acting as a server and we are forcing the target connect to us. In bind shell, we are connecting to a target on the same principle, but we have more chance of getting triggered by something. So those are the two types of connections, and so now we have a meterpreter session. So what is it that? A meterpreter session is basically a session between two devices, and that session is just an environment created by specific payloads and exploits. So for example, when we get a reverse shell, that reverse shell can be meterpreter shell, so we get into a new environment with new actually options, new fundamental things, and the meterpreter session is basically the best thing we can ever get from that machine. For example, if we get a reverse shell, we get only the shell, but if we get the reverse meterpreter, we get a whole new environment that can enable us to actually record the microphone, see the desktop without the user even know that. We can actually, if there's a webcam, we can shoot and stream from that webcam without the user know anything. We can actually do a lot of stuff. There is a new menu, a new syntax for a lot of options, and we can go for easily specify all syntax, all the options, what they do, what they are. We're gonna see them in future videos. There are modules that can be run from meterpreter, and also there can be shell running from meterpreter. So if you have a meterpreter session, we can run shell from there. So it's really the best thing we can get from device. If we get a meterpreter session, it's game over. We are just on that machine. So our goal is to actually get a meterpreter session over there running. If we cannot get a meterpreter, if somehow it's getting triggered by something, we can go for something more heavy, less heavy, like a shell one, because the shell one is actually not that heavy as a meterpreter because it's less than kilobytes. It's sending a little small information, a little small amount of packets. But the meterpreter is sending much packet, it's sending much information. It's not that invisible, it's more likely to be triggered by something. But on the other hand, if we manage to get a meterpreter session, it's the game over. So we go for that. If we don't success, we go for shell. So now let's move on into the different type of sessions. As we said before, there are meterpreter, shell, HTTP, HTTPS. These are all the modules in Metasploit, and you're gonna see that in future videos. For example, we can go for bind reverse shell, TCP reverse shell. All those options has the two types of connectivities, so bind and reverse. We have bind and reverse meterpreter, we have bind and reverse shell, bind and reverse HTTPS, and there are many more. You're gonna see them in future videos. So the type of sessions are the protocols they are used, or the meterpreter, which we said that is the new environment. So there is a protocol, for example HTTP, and there is the connection method, which is the reverse or bind, and there is the payload. So we have, for example, Windows, meterpreter, reverse, TCP connection, and that's it. So you're gonna see that in future videos, and you're gonna clear your mind from all that things, because I know it's a lot of information, so do not worry about it. You're gonna see all in the future videos, but before that you need to theoretically know what's actually meterpreter, shell, HTTPS, reverse, bind connections, and that stuff. So guys, I really appreciate you for watching. I really try to explain as much as possible and to make things clearer as possible. In the next video, we're gonna start practicing all the things that we've learned here. In this module, we're gonna not only hack, we're gonna write code for a hack. We're gonna see the basics of Python, the basics of C. We're gonna use override options. We're gonna play around with different frameworks for creating payloads. We're gonna create our own payloads and try to fire them against some security systems. And we're gonna see how our progress will be, but the future videos will be really interesting for you. We're gonna write code and hack into systems, hack into Linux, hack into Windows. We're gonna do all of that crazy stuff. So I really thank you for watching and see you in the next practical video. Stay tuned.